Well, President Biden dominated the Michigan primary with overwhelming support, yet the 100,000 uncommitted votes won at least one of the state's delegates, according to Decision Desk HQ results, which is a blow to President Biden that reflects some deep unhappiness from certain parts of his party, especially over his handling of Israel's war in Gaza. Now, yesterday on The View, Whoopi Goldberg had a message for so-called one-issue voters in the Democratic Party. Let's watch.
I understand you're upset. We talked about this yesterday. I understand you're upset. But, you know, either we're going to fix it together or we're not. And the other guy is not going to fix it at all.
Meanwhile, former MSNBC host Mehdi Hasan made his return to CNN yesterday, where he told Jake Tapper the uncommitted tally is on Biden, not voters.
I also think it's crazy that Joe Biden is willing to wreck his presidency potentially and American democracy if Trump gets back in for Benjamin Netanyahu, a man who has basically, I can't find the daytime language for it, done bad things to every Democratic president in my lifetime.
All right. So there's been a full court press by Democrats, liberal media pundits, to wave away the significance of what happened in Michigan earlier this week. And the argument that they make is to, in large part, to look back at other uncommitted ballot lines in the past that are similar in size or larger. Specifically, they like to talk about what it looked like for Obama in 2008, but what they omit from that was that he wasn't on the ballot at that time because he specifically asked his supporters not to participate in a non-binding primary and then in 2012 asked them not to participate in a non-binding primary. So it's a very misleading accounting because those significant not uncommitted tallies are people who are expressing a preference for the leading candidate on the Democratic ticket in that race, not a effort to get them to vote against the leading candidate in a Democratic race. Not to mention the fact that it broadly ignores the very slim margins that have historically existed in Michigan and frankly in many states around the country in 2016 in particular. What was the total aggregate of votes that Hillary Clinton?
11,000 votes that Trump won by.
Exactly.
And Biden won by a lot more.
Yeah.
100,000, more than 100,000
votes.
I
think it was about 150,000.
Yeah, 150,000 votes. So 100,000 uncommitted people choose not to. Again, it's not, they're probably not going to vote for Trump. So Whoopi's making, she's making a pitch there that you have to fear Trump. But it's again that line that the thing that's wrong with the Biden administration and Biden's policies is not him but you.
Right.
What the problem is you, that you're not supporting him full-throatedly enough. And that just doesn't seem like a message that is going. Maybe there's someone in the country who responds to that. I don't know about the people in Michigan who are specifically upset. The Muslim Arab voters, young people in college towns like my own college town, Ann Arbor. I don't think that's going to be a message that really resonates with them.
You know what's interesting about that? I was listening to Pod Save America and actually Mehdi Hasan talking about this. And one of the Pod Save America hosts, Jon Favreau, argued that he actually gave him some relief in terms of the Democrats' odds, Joe Biden's odds in the fall.
That it wasn't as bad as he expected?
And specifically, college towns didn't have as bad an outcome for Joe Biden versus uncommitted as places like Dearborn with heavy Arab American population. And he anticipated, he said, well, I thought that young people would be leading the charge here. And I read that a little bit differently. Young people don't tend to come out and vote in primary elections.
Yeah, uncommitted got, I think, 30% of the vote in Ann Arbor, a little less than that in East Lansing, which is where Michigan State is.
So there's an argument that when you have a general election where there's a bigger percentage of the electorate that is young people that turns out, you might have different kinds of results. And frankly, there might be momentum behind this unexpected and unprecedented effort here. Remember, the goal of the uncommitted campaign in Michigan was just to get 10,000 votes. 10,000. They got 10x that. And it's worth noting that there are a number of other states that have uncommitted options. About 20 or so, Idaho, Montana, Michigan, Colorado, Iowa, Massachusetts, Minnesota, North Carolina, Tennessee, Hawaii, D.C., New Jersey. There are a lot of opportunities for people to come out and say, okay, you didn't think that was significant this time? Well, you think it's significant if we continue to replicate these results all across the country, including in other states that are sensitive for Democrats, must-win states where they have very narrow margins.
Yeah. I know it is something. I mean, it's something that Michael LaRosa, who is a former Biden staff member, comms person for both the president and the first lady, conceded yesterday that he is concerned about this, that he doesn't understand the media strategy behind the Biden campaign, that keeping the press at bay is clearly not working. It's allowing everyone to speculate somewhat based on what they see in these brief press conferences he does, the anecdotes he tells, where the concerns about his cognitive impairment come through. It could be in an interview that he does even worse. But at this point, you got to try something because the polls just show him losing. So why he has decided on this strategy, maybe because it sort of worked last time during COVID to hide in the basement and let Trump just seem to many people, including, frankly, Republicans, that he was not handling COVID well and that he was kind of careening wildly from one agenda to the next, or had even turned the whole thing over to advisors who Republicans increasingly didn't think very highly of. Whatever went wrong for the Trump campaign, it was more about his flaws or his failures toward the end of his presidency than about anything affirmatively Biden was doing. Sure. Biden just kind of suggested, don't look, if you vote for me, it'll be normal again.
Right.
And that worked.
It did work, but also remember this, the narrative about Biden being in the basement. It wasn't exactly the same as the narrative that's happening right now. Remember, at the time, the concern was because he was an older person and he was vulnerable to COVID.
Die. Yeah.
Not that he was kind of inherently frail or that there were these cognitive concerns that have emerged now.
No, he was an at-risk age group for COVID, even for healthy people at that age. Yeah.
And he's a very different person than he was in 2020. There, of course, were these moments where people questioned his mental fitness, most notably at that one debate where Castro called him out on it. Yeah. But generally speaking, it was nothing like what we're seeing right now. And that on top of the news that there was a choice not to do the cognitive fitness exam in this most recent health test. That sparked a whole another cycle of articles and speculation about why
Edward Snowden pointed that out on Twitter, I saw.
Exactly. So this situation, the implication, whether or not you think it's fair, isn't going away for Joe Biden. De La Rosa, we were talking to him yesterday, seemed to suggest, well, maybe he would fare better if he did more appearances, if he was out in public more. And that might be the case. But is that possible? Yeah. Does the Biden administration understand that they are disadvantaging their clients, their principal, by keeping him from the public? But that's a better outcome than if he were actually before the public, making the kind of gas that he's been making.
If their position is actually that he would be doing even worse if he was in front of the public more, then they should find another candidate. There just needs to be a different candidate.
It's hard to get around the conclusion. Now, to the extent that it's still a close race, and the issue of his handling of Gaza is what's could potentially make the difference for him. It's worth noting that the Biden administration seems to be going forward with this narrative that says we're trying for a ceasefire is coming soon. Obviously, we saw him float that in advance of the Michigan election date.
Totally contrary to what both Israel and Hamas actually said about it.
And his spokespeople have had to walk that back a little bit. But fundamentally, even without that little bit of chicanery that we saw this week, the United States has vetoed ceasefire resolutions before the UN 3 times now, on 3 separate occasions. So even though there are these media cycles where the claim is made, and there was one just yesterday, the claim is made that it's because of Hamas that there can't be a ceasefire. What should be made really clear to the public is what Palestinians want, what Hamas wants is a permanent ceasefire. Otherwise, there's no guarantee that the bombardments won't stop and that they won't be ethnically cleansed, regardless if they hand over all the hostages. And so what they need is some guarantee. All ceasefire deals are going to not be successful if Israel won't accept the idea that there has to be a permanent ceasefire at some point and that they're not going to get territorial control of Gaza. As long as that is the explicit or tacit ambition, we're not going to have a ceasefire. And that's a very bad situation for Joe Biden to be in from a political perspective, not to mention the moral implications.
More Rising right after this.